Folks, we have breaking news this hour. All Democrats and 10 wayward Republicans, in the interest of unifying the country, they have impeached President Trump, who earned a record number of votes for any incumbent U.S. president in our history. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show here on Newsmax TV. The die is cast. America is now poised for years of division, strife, and conflict after the House Democrats set up an impeachment vote against President Trump, even though he has only 7 days left in office. The long-lasting damage done to the United States is incalculable at this point, but signals are coming from the GOP that the establishment wing there wants to purge President Trump and his supporters from their party. We have all-star guests lined up to address the myriad consequences of that move. Dick Morris, Wayne Allen Root, and live a simulcast with radio host and former Trump insider Sebastian Gorka. They will help us gauge the fallout from such a reckless decision. Also tonight, beating big tech. Can that be done? Activist and entrepreneur Gavin McInnes joining us to discuss. But before we proceed any further, I want to discuss a potentially suicidal choice that is being made by some in the Republican Party. It's a choice that could prove catastrophic for human liberty, freedom, and our very republic. The GOP's effort to purge Trump and his supporters. That's the subject of tonight's preamble. The news broke after this show yesterday. Liz Cheney, a woman who I have had a great deal of respect for, and who was a member of GOP leadership, was going to join the likes of Adam Kissinger, who is deserving of little respect, in my opinion, in pledging to vote to impeach President Trump. Congresswoman, I should say, Jamie Herrera Butler from Washington, Dan Newhouse from the same state, John Katko from New York, and Fred Upton from Michigan joined a couple of other Republicans and joined socialists in impeaching President Trump for saying this.
We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's fair to point out, my friends, that the socialist impeachment mongers didn't specify any language in Trump's speech that proved incitement of insurrection. They did that on purpose. Trump's speech, which on its face advocated nothing beyond peaceful protest, did not qualify as incitement to riot under federal law, and Pelosi and her merry band of Marxist-Leninists know it. Nor did Trump's speech exceed the bounds of constitutionally protected speech as described in the 1969 Supreme Court case, Brandenburg versus Ohio. That case determined that one could actually advocate illegal behavior and it's still covered under the First Amendment, so long as the advocacy would not likely incite imminent lawless action and as long as specific direction isn't given to carry out that lawless activity. Trump did none of those things. In fact, we played many sound bites yesterday of Democrat socialists calling for BLM and Antifa riots to continue. They called for, quote, unrest and, quote, uprisings. That last term was used by Nancy Pelosi herself. By the way, Kinzinger, Cheney, and any of the other Republicans, have they ever talked of charging or recalling or prosecuting those Democrats for inspiring BLM and Antifa violence? No. Now, we're used to socialists using and abusing the law to lash out at their enemies. What we're not used to is the GOP joining in. Aside from the 10 Republicans who voted against 75 million Americans with their vote to impeach President Trump, an article ran in the New York Times yesterday that sent shockwaves through the conservative grassroots. The headline read, McConnell is said to be pleased about impeachment, believing it will be easier to purge Trump from the GOP. Now, we have praised Senator McConnell for his work with President Trump on judges over the last 4 years. Because of that, we wanted to give Senator McConnell the benefit of the doubt. We reached out to his office to see if the New York Times reporting was accurate. Given the New York Times political bias, we don't trust anything that paper prints. As of the airing of this show, we have not heard back from McConnell's office. Here's what the New York Times wrote. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the Republican leader, has told associates that he believes President Trump committed impeachable offenses and that he is pleased that Democrats are moving to impeach him, believing that it will make it easier to purge him from the party, according to people familiar with his thinking. So the Times, eager to destroy the GOP and our country alongside their preferred party, the Democrat Socialists, didn't actually talk to McConnell. But to say Republicans who say they know what McConnell is thinking, that's who they were quoting. Here's why we think Mitch McConnell would never say something like this. He knows that would be a disaster. McConnell knows that the energy and fundraising that the GOP has enjoyed over these last 4 years, that's been courtesy of President Trump. His policies and his ability to implement those policies in the face of historic opposition from Democrat socialists. That is, they're in the back pocket of the Communist Party of China, and Trump still got things done. If these so-called Republicans are successful in purging President Trump and his supporters, what will be left of the GOP? Let me ask all of you out there. Would you be inspired to vote for or donate to a Republican Party that purged you and President Trump out? Given GOP timidity on voting irregularities in the 2020 election, given the GOP's signing a consent decree in Georgia that did, among other things, reduce the signature verification on an exponentially greater tranche of mail-in ballots, the GOP can no longer protect constituents from the socialist onslaught coming from Washington, D.C. Congressman Jason Smith from Missouri delivered the bad news to us yesterday. Can the Republicans do anything to stop what I believe is going to be a socialist onslaught that is going to grip this country?
We can if we can get the numbers. It's just a simple math game. If we can get half of the votes, and I'm hoping that some of the folks on the other side of the aisle will see the light. I mean, we work in the people's house, the House of Representatives. It is time that people will start putting people before politics.
Folks, you heard that right. You and I, and freedom lovers everywhere, have to rely on Democrats remembering that they're Americans if we're to survive a swamp of socialism. Here's another question. How much of the GOP is made up of Trump supporters? And how much of the GOP supports the likes of Mitt Romney, Adam Kissinger, and Fred Upton? Remember Trump's accomplishments? Historic peace deals in the Middle East, border wall construction, and a huge reduction in illegal immigration into the United States, historic tax cuts, and a rescued military beaten down from a decade of abuse at the hands of Obama and Biden. What do you think? 60% of the GOP is Trump? 65% of the GOP? 70%? Know that the New York Times and their political party are hoping that there's just enough Trump supporters to split the GOP vote, ensuring the socialists will never lose another election. That's a suicide for the United States, and why I think the New York Times actually published that piece. But what if the number is 70% or more of the GOP that would be purged? Now, don't forget, 10 to 15% of the Democrat Party, you know, the ones who rejected socialism, rejected pro-China trade deals, rejected defunding the police and the loss of free speech. If they no longer have a home either in the Democrat Socialist Party, they could join the purged Trump supporters. What will we have then? I think experts would call that a third party. If that happens, and in America, a nation that sees the independent party as its largest voting bloc, perhaps it will be the socialists and the Republicans who are purged from relevance in American politics. Now, that's something to ponder, or some might say something to aspire to.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.